morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone in the global audience that we have here today. Welcome to the Turing Boundaryless podcast, where I will be your guest for today. My name is Callie Rothberg, and I am a Director of Enterprise Sales here at Turing.com. I'd like everyone to put their hands together for our very special guest, Qingchen Wang, who is a lead machine learning scientist on our data science team here at Turing. We're really excited to have you, QC, and to get to hear a little bit more about your journey through life as a machine learning scientist and up to today, currently working at Turing. So welcome. How's everything going today?
Yeah, it's going great. Thank you for inviting me to do this, and really looking forward to share my story.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think to start, let's just get an understanding of where you were before Turing. What was your professional career looking like? What have you accomplished? Would love to know a little backstory about you.
Yeah, so before joining Turing, right, I've done a bunch of things, and actually, like I started my machine learning journey probably before machine learning became as hot as it currently is. I mean, I've always been interested in AI from a young age, so it was just kind of natural when I discovered this particular field. So back in 2013 or so, I had to decide what to do with my career. And at the time, most people in machine learning were focused on like software development type of work. And instead, I really wanted to apply machine learning to business problems. So around that time, I started a PhD in business, hoping to solve business problems with machine learning. And there was a kind of a convoluted journey there, but eventually I made it through. Mm-hmm. And after making through the PhD in like around 2019, I joined the University of Hong Kong as an assistant professor of business analytics, where I continue to apply machine learning to business problems. And during this period as well, I was working part-time as a data scientist. So I was quite active in just solving all kinds of machine learning problems that companies have. They're not the same type of problems that your big tech typically solves. More smaller problems like, how can you better optimize your workforce? How do you schedule your staff? How do you sequence certain actions to achieve a kind of a long-term goal? So, I mean, many of these problems companies do face. It's just that they're not as well known as your like typical search engine or image detection type of problems.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, and before you got to Turing, I mean, can you kind of elaborate on a problem that you worked on that maybe was the most challenging or the most rewarding, or just to give us a kind of a concrete example of something that you had worked on?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I'll just tell you a problem that I kind of started working on before joining Turing, and that I'm actually still working on, kind of on the side. Okay. So I had been collaborating with a doctor in the Hong Kong University Medical School, and one of the problems that we were looking at is, can we predict the life expectancy of patients with spine tumors, because these are patients where doctors have to decide whether to do surgery or not to remove the tumor. But oftentimes the patients may not even survive that long after the surgery, so it may not be worthwhile to do the surgery. So we wanted to use machine learning trained on the large type of data sets that we currently have in the medical domain, basically a lot of patient-related information, to see if we can more accurately predict what are the chances that a patient will survive such a surgery. And that's something that I'm quite passionate about, because you're essentially trying to solve some of the current healthcare problems that we're facing today, right? And it's still in progress. So we have kind of done the initial investigation. We built the machine learning models, but the next step is really to see how we can use this in the hospital setting, in the clinical setting, in order to drive actual real life impact.
Wow, that is amazing. Just the idea of using like technology and machine learning to save lives. That's awesome. Thank you for working on that. Cool. So I guess kind of going forward a bit, I'd love to understand how you came upon Turing. It has been brought to my attention that you've kind of gone through the Turing vetting process as part of your, I guess, application or interview process, like any Turing engineer would. So I'd love to understand your journey there and how it may, compare to the Silicon Valley standard, if you will, knowing that you are based in California in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so it's actually really quite interesting. It's a really interesting story in my opinion. Typically in the tech industry, right, whether that's Silicon Valley or elsewhere, there's a lot of information asymmetry in the sense that there's a lot of people applying to a small number of jobs, and the employers have a hard time figuring out which candidates are good and which candidates are not so good. So there's different ways to solve for this. In some places, employers are very, how should I say, very liberal in terms of who they hire. But in some places, employers can be very, very strict. So if we take Silicon Valley, for example, the typical interview process is like multiple rounds of 1 hour interviews. It could be technical, it could be behavioral, but it's actually a lot of effort for both the candidates to go through and also for the employers to go through themselves. So I've kind of experienced that a bit with a few different big tech firms, and every time I went through that, I felt like, well, it went okay, but I didn't really get a chance to really tell the employer, the potential employer, who I was, right? And I really didn't get a chance to figure out, well, what exactly does this employer do, right? I mean, I know their name, like they could be Google or Facebook or whatever, right? But what exactly does a team do? What exactly do they work on? I really have no idea. So when Turing came along, it was quite unique in the sense that a recruiter had initially reached out to me, asked me if I was interested, and I thought, okay, this sounds interesting. I followed up, and then he said, hey, can you come onto our platform and do some of these tests? And I thought, okay, well, why not? Let me take a look. Some of the big tech firms do have like online coding challenges that they require candidates to do before even like the first interview. So I thought, okay, let's try it. And then when I went into it, what was really interesting is, myself being like a machine learning person, the first thing I jumped in was this machine learning test. And it's actually rare to see machine learning tests out there. Most of the times when companies interview, they ask very, how should I say, very fundamental book questions about machine learning. Like, for example, what is regularization? How do you handle certain situations? But most of that material you can just learn from books using like well-known information, but it doesn't really test your experience. It doesn't test your ability to truly understand or appreciate what it is that you're even talking about. It's just answering questions like an exam. So when I was doing the machine learning test at Turing, I felt like this was actually the most interesting machine learning related test I've ever done. And it really kind of gets into whether you know machine learning or not. Okay, the questions are much more practical. They're like, okay, you have this exact situation. You might want to improve your model in some way. Do you do this by adding more training data? Do you do this by using a different type of training data, etc.? And these are questions that no university or no course is going to ask. But these are really important questions where in practice, right, when you're doing machine learning, you have to answer these questions in order to improve your models all the time. So I thought it was a really, really interesting experience. So I spent maybe like 45 minutes or so doing the test. And when I passed, I thought, hey, this is pretty cool, right? So in our data science vetting process, there's a few other tests. There's like the Python test, then the SQL test, and the data analysis test. So just kind of out of my own interest, I decided to do them. And when I passed, I ended up having another like a technical coding challenge that was about 30 minutes. And in the end, it took me probably the same amount of time that it would take to do like an actual 5-round interview. But I was able to do it whenever I wanted. I didn't feel like I need to schedule them all in 1 week. I did some of these different tests, even across maybe 1 to 2 months. And it was just kind of based on my own interest. At the time, I wasn't so sure I wanted to join Turing, but at least I thought the tests were interesting. And then after finding out that the tests were quite interesting, I thought, okay, well, this is an interesting company, right? Because, well, I really enjoyed these tests. And it was like, for me, I wasn't really in it to interview with a company. I was doing the test because I thought, hey, this was interesting. It's a way for me to test my skills and maybe I could learn something as well, right? And because I had such a positive experience with the test, I thought, hey, this is a really interesting company, and it might be a company that I actually want to work with.
Cool. So when going through the vetting, just compared to Silicon Valley, just to recap, what I'm hearing is you got to just basically have the freedom to do it on your own time with your own interest. And because of that, you kind of gained this like curiosity, like, wow, these tests are really interesting. And there wasn't the pressure of, the typical Silicon Valley interview that now led you to a job that I'm assuming you enjoy and love since you're still here. Is that?
Yes, exactly, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like your typical tech interviews are really, really stressful. I mean, I've heard stories from people where even though they're very experienced, right, and they still go through these tests, and it just feels like a really stressful period. And for me, I felt the same way when I was doing some of the Silicon Valley style interviews. So kind of being able to do the vetting test on Turing at my own leisure, basically, whenever I want, however I wanted, I really felt much better.
Cool. And so now being on the other side, having gone through the vetting and now actually working internally at Turing, how would you say, AI and machine learning actually is helping to vet developers at a higher enough standard for our customers that are coming to Turing, to shorten their interview to hire process? They want to be able to trust our vetting. So how does AI and ML play a part in that?
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that our tests themselves are actually quite good. And ultimately, developers they want to get a job, right? They want to do well, and they're interested in working for the companies that are hiring through Turing. So as far as the AI and ML side is concerned, what we really want to do is to ensure that the right developers or the right candidates get matched for the right jobs. Okay, and this is actually quite a challenging problem because if you think about kind of at a high level what Turing is, we're a two-sided marketplace where you have on one side someone who's looking to let's say purchase some kind of service, right, or some kind of a product maybe. In our case, they're looking to hire a developer, right? In the other side is someone who is offering some kind of a service or maybe some kind of a product. Now, traditionally, the well-known two-sided marketplace is a company like Uber, where you have people who are looking to hire rides and people who are giving rides, right? However, the thing about a company like Uber is that you know exactly what to expect, right? So when you call an Uber, you know exactly that you want to ride from point A to point B, and then for the drivers, right? They know they're just there to offer rides from point A to point B. Now, the challenge with what we face at Turing is for customers, right? We don't always know exactly what they want. I mean, after all, they're humans, right? And Callie, I'm sure you do have these kinds of experiences with our customers, but one of our major goals is to do our best using AI and of course using human intuition to figure out what is it that a customer actually needs, right? So when they say, look, I'm looking for a developer with, let's just focus on the machine learning world, right? They're looking for a machine learning engineer with Python experience, with machine learning experience. Well, that's usually not enough information by itself. And we need to figure out based on the job description, based on our interactions with the customer, what is it that they're really looking for, right? And then on the other side, we have developers who have, of course, uploaded their resume, who have done some of our tests, but that's not a lot of information that we know about them as well, right? It's not just like, oh, well, this person has taken a machine learning test, they must be the best candidate for every machine learning job. That's certainly not the case. So we do have to use AI to try to figure out, based on all the information that we have about the customer's requests, all the information that we have about the developer's profile and kind of their past experiences, we try to figure out, okay, who is really the suitable candidate for this job, or even vice versa, right? Like, is this job the suitable job for this candidate? And that's a two-sided marketplace problem that we're faced with. And to be honest, it's very hard. It's probably unsolved, and we hope to solve it one day.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's at least for me, being on the sales side, it's such an interesting just industry to be in because it's a human to human interaction. There's what is the saying that the most unreliable product, I think, is humans, right? We all are individuals. We think differently. We have our own strengths, weaknesses, etc. So yeah, I can definitely see how this, like, trying to match a client to another developer, both humans, is extremely complex. Is there anything in particular that about this problem, like from your lens as a machine learning engineer, that makes it particularly like complex? Maybe that, as the average person who's not a machine learning engineer wouldn't necessarily think of or know. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so I would say the key challenge is not necessarily technical per se, but it's really figuring out how can we make the most out of the data that we have, and how can we perhaps understand better the developers and the customers. So let me kind of give you a more a relatable example, right? So let's say you have a friend, a very close friend, who is a machine learning engineer, and they're looking for a machine learning engineering job, right? And you have another friend who is a hiring manager at a company who's hiring machine learning engineers, right? Now, in that situation, you know a lot about your friends, both of your friends, right? You can say, look, this person is really, really strong at machine learning. You tell your other friend, hey, you should hire this person, right? And then you tell your engineer friend, oh, this company is really great. Actually, my friend is a hiring manager there. They're looking for a person to do exactly, A, B, C, D, E, and F. And in those cases, you can probably do a very good job of determining whether this would be a good match for both the engineer and for the company, right? So that's kind of the level of closeness we want to be able to achieve with our developers and with our customers. Of course, the challenge here is, everything is remote, and we've never met any of our developers initially, right? We've never really met any of our customers either. So the question is, how can we kind of figure out how to achieve that level of closeness just based on the data that we have, right? And I think to a certain degree, what makes the staffing industry in general challenging is precisely that. I mean, like, when recruiters contact someone, they don't really know much about that person, right? And I've seen cases where recruiters contact me and say some weird things, tell me, hey, are you interested in this job that does, let's say, hardware engineering? And I'm thinking, well, I know nothing about hardware engineering, right? And this is actually very common. I mean, this is more of like a negative case. But then on the positive side, right, if a recruiter tells me, hey, it turns out that we think you're really suitable for this particular project or this particular initiative, et cetera, then I may be more interested, right? So what we hope to achieve is this level of understanding, this level of closeness, but it's just very, very hard because we do have very limited information about both the customers and our developers.
Got it. So really trying to find or solve the problem for how can we become that friend to the customer and friend to the engineer, so that we have that, like, innate knowledge of, oh, you have these skills and these interests and these motivations. This job is going to be amazing for you.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
I mean, maybe just to add on to that, right, to be more precise, like, it's fairly easy for us to understand what kind of skills someone have, but you also mentioned motivations and interests, right? Those are inherently very, very difficult for machines to figure out. And, that's probably the type of challenge that we're working on solving right now.
Gotcha. Okay. And so just to kind of jump around to a different topic, you did mention briefly that, part of this challenge is that we are all remote, especially within Turing. We're hiring engineers from all over the globe. And so I want to touch on that. I know, at Turing, you do manage a team. So I'd like to just hear your experience. Like, how is your team distributed? What has your experience been as a manager of a remote team? And would love to just, understand your thoughts on that with time zones, the different cultures, et cetera.
Yeah, actually, I would say remote has its challenges, but also it really has, in my opinion, far more benefits than challenges.
Okay.
Now, my team specifically, I believe we are 8 people in, at this point, 8 people in 7 different countries. So in my own small team, we represent Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Russia, Argentina, Italy / Peru, and I'm in the US. So I guess in
Wow.
that, for us, it's eight countries because one of our members, he's based in Italy, but he's actually from Peru. So
Gotcha.
8 people from 8 very, very different places, right?
Yeah.
Now, of
Maybe
course,
even 8 different time zones, potentially.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
yes. Well, 7 different time zones because the person was based in Italy. But yes, 8 people, 7 different time zones, right? So time zone definitely
Wow.
is a challenge. And at Turing, how we solve for that is we do ask our colleagues from the eastern parts of the world to share at least like a 4 hour or 6 hour overlap with the US time. And the main reason for that is, of course, we do need a certain level of collaboration in order for many cross-functional work to be done successfully, right? So everyone is very happy and willing to share that kind of overlap. And just in my opinion, right, a lot of developers or data scientists actually prefer to work in the evenings. I remember back in my college days, I'm far more productive at like 10 p.m. than I am at, let's say, 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. So I usually did my homework quite late during the day or in the evening. And that's still the case for some of some engineers these days, right? So actually, the level of happiness of our team members with respect to the time zones and time zone overlaps,
Mhm.
I have not seen any issues there. So that's a really nice positive, which kind of helps us get around the time zone problem. So then on the flip side, there are so many benefits from having a remote and distributed team, right? One is that I get to learn so much about other people's culture. Like, we have people from different countries. So like my colleague from Malaysia, well, he gets to tell us about how Malaysia actually has, I think, like 3 different major ethnicities. So they celebrate different holidays there.
Wow.
We used to have a colleague from, I think, Bosnia, and he mentioned like how Christmas is different there. Our colleagues from Russia celebrates a different Christmas period than usually in like Europe and the US. So people from different locations really it just adds more interest and fun to the team. So it's right now it's winter time in most people in the northern hemisphere, but my colleague from Argentina, well, she says, yeah, it's 35 degrees Celsius over there, which is something like 100 degree Fahrenheit or close to that. So
Yeah.
it's just very interesting, right? Of course, our colleagues from Russia say, oh, it's negative 30 degrees Celsius there. It's
Goodness.
just a lot more fun, right? And then because people are from different cultures, different backgrounds, you kind of jump out of this idea of everyone you're working with lives in the same little bubble, right? Imagine if you're always in the Silicon Valley bubble, you're talking about the same concerns, the same issues, whereas because I'm usually working with people all around the world, we usually can talk about all the positive things that we're seeing, and once in a while we talk about the negative things, but then there's others around you to kind of say, oh yeah, don't worry about that, this other thing that's positive, instead of everyone saying, oh yeah, it's really, really bad because whatever happening around us is going on, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun to have this distributed team.
Yeah. I'm also curious, just in regards to like your access to talent. Um, I'd love to hear from you, just your thoughts on that. And, you being in California, or sorry, you're actually in New York.
Yes, I'm in
Um,
New York.
yeah. So you
I wish
being,
I was in California.
yeah, I think earlier in our discussion, I mentioned you're in California, but I'm realizing you're in New York. I'm in New York. We're both in New York.
Yeah.
So putting that on the record. But just being, that you're in New York, and I guess maybe you've had this experience of having to hire individuals within a certain region versus now your experience hiring all over the globe. Like, what are the key differences there, and benefits or not benefits to that?
Yeah. I would say there's, to be honest, only benefits, and let me kind of explain in a bit more detail. So of course, the obvious benefit is we have access to far more talent, right? As you know, in the US, there's a huge demand for high quality data scientists, machine learning engineers, or just engineers in general, right? And of course, it's very expensive when you try to compete against the other big tech firms for these types of talent. So by being able to go international, right, we're able to hire some really, really, really high quality candidates from all around the world. And the nice thing is that we can treat everyone as first-class citizens, whereas in some cases you have companies that have like maybe a primary HQ in the US and a small center somewhere in elsewhere in the world, and maybe there's a little bit of this kind of first class, second class citizen type of situation. Whereas for us, because everyone is remote, we basically there's no situation where okay, there's a group of people who are seeing each other often, talking to each other, and then another group is left out, right? So kind of just I guess just digressing a bit, but coming back to the talent of hiring, we're able to really hire from around the world, and it just opens up our talent pool significantly. There are plenty of really high quality candidates all around the world, in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia. I mean, I would say between like South Asia and Southeast Asia, and of course Eastern Asia as well, there's a lot of really high quality talent, and they're looking for great opportunities as well, right? So internally, when we hire data scientists to our team, we can really hire at a much faster rate than I would say if we were constrained to the US. So, on the other side, right, typically people have one concern about hiring internationally, and that is like, well, I don't really know anything about this person's company or this past employer or this person's degree, right? What university they went. I don't know what's good and what's bad. So I have less signals to work with when deciding if someone is a good candidate or not. And I want to say, I think that's not a detriment, but that's actually a nice thing, because we all have our biases, right? So if I see, let's say, someone graduated from Stanford versus someone who graduated from a much less well-known university, then I think typically we would be biased towards the person who had this brand name degree with this brand name past employer in their resume. However, I think that's completely unfair, right? You should treat each individual candidate based on the level of skills they're able to demonstrate and the quality of their work. So when we hire abroad, right? Well, we don't know that much about what school they went to, what employer they work for. So I can actually focus more on what is it they have actually done, right? And what is it that they'll be able to do with Turing in the future. So that really gives me, in my opinion, a more unbiased view of candidates. And I think in the long run, that's going to make the company better, because you just have more diversity. You reduce the amount of like different types of biases that we all face on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that using just the global workforce and sourcing talent globally as a way to really stay unbiased. That's a really, really great point. And I think the world is moving towards that, and as much as we possibly can. And employees are demanding it of their employers. So yeah, I really like that point. So I guess, just as our world has changed so much over the past 2 years, right? With the pandemic, and, going fully remote globally and collectively. I'm curious if you have any additional thoughts you want to share just on the future of work in the workplace, whether it's related to AI or not.
Yeah, so I think I want to say the future of work is remote, and I guess the reason I say that is not because I'm working for Turing,
Mhm.
but it's more because I have been working remotely for probably the past 4 or 5 years. So even
Mhm.
before the pandemic, when I was working as an academic, I was actually collaborating with different partners in Europe, in Asia, and in the US, all at the same time. So like in the morning, so I was based in Asia at the time. In the mornings, I would collaborate with people in the US West Coast, and then around the afternoons, I would have calls with people in Europe, and then late at night, I would have calls with people in the US East Coast. So that was kind of how I did things. And that actually worked quite well in the sense that, well, I don't have to force myself to commute to work. I don't have to be constrained to partners within the specific area that I was in, or companies that were there, right? I can actually work with global collaborators and solve global types of problems. And I thought that was very interesting for me. So I actually have a very happy spot for remote work. And I think, again, future of work is remote. Now, that's one side of things, right? But the other side is, well, if we were to work remotely, if companies were to hire all around the world, right, then naturally what we would expect is everyone should have access to any kind of job opportunity out there. And then, of course, any company should have access to good candidates out there, right? So that's, of course, how things should eventually be. I mean, I'm sure all of us have been through situations where we thought, hey, a job was very suitable for us, but because of geographical constraints or maybe certain other types of reasons that we were not, given the opportunity, right? I mean, I think anyone who probably has lived for like 25 or 30 years will have experienced something like this at one point or another. I mean, I remember experiencing this myself probably just a bit over 20 years ago. All right, or sorry, 10 years ago, not 20. Yeah, about 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, we should be able to hire people, and, candidates should be able to work for companies around the world. And it should be very easy to vet candidates. Like, it should be easy to know that this person is high quality without forcing them to go through 5 hours of interviews, only to see like maybe 1% of that person, right? You want to be able
Right.
to understand maybe at least 60% of a person, while requiring both sides to maybe expend only 20% of the effort that they used to do in the past. So I think that's certainly possible. I think that's the future of work. But again, that's not where we are. That's not where we're at right now, right? So we want to work towards that, and hopefully leveraging AI and machine learning can help us achieve it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so too. And I totally agree. The future of work is remote. I've also worked remotely for 4 years and don't plan on, ever switching that up. I love it. It, gives us flexibility and in ways that we, would not have otherwise. So totally. So I think I have one other question, and this is I have heard this through the grapevine, and I think maybe when you were sharing initially about your background, you were being quite humble. But can you tell us a bit about this Grandmaster something status that you have in the AI machine learning world, and just share a bit more about that for our more tech nerds that may be listening in?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I kind of skipped over it, but
Yeah.
I guess officially I am a Kaggle competitions Grandmaster. And what that is basically it's a status awarded to a number of people who have performed very well on multiple predictive analytics for like machine learning competitions. So just to give the audience some more context, In the machine learning world, there's a platform called Kaggle. I think they started maybe back in around 2009, 2010, then was acquired by Google maybe around 2016, 2017. Don't quote me on the dates. That's just kind of my memory. And what this platform does is they host machine learning competitions for all kinds of companies. Company clients could be something like Google, Facebook, Amazon, etc. And they put some data on the platform and they say, hey, please solve this prediction problem for us. And then internationally, people jump on the platform to compete in these competitions. So I first came across this platform in 2012 as like a course project. So during my machine learning program, we were asked to go and solve one of the problems on Kaggle. And that's kind of when I first got familiar with it. But then later on, back in 2015, I actually had some kind of free time on my hands. I didn't know what to do really, so I decided, let me just try my luck with some of these competitions. And it turns out that because I was already kind of well-trained in machine learning, and together with learning all the tricks that people were doing there, I was able to do fairly well and really like maybe came in the top 5 in a few competitions. And as a result of that, I was able to earn this Grandmaster status. So yeah, I do recommend anyone who's interested in machine learning to try out one of those competitions and really work hard at it.
Awesome. And do you know how many people to date like have that status or that title?
Yeah, I think to date, probably about 250 people in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I know at one point, like they have this ladder ranking system. I think at one point I was ranked 14th. But then like you keep losing points over time. So I think my ranking is just not even worth talking about anymore. But there's always new talent. I remember there was a guy who was just a high school student and he got started early and he was able to become a grandmaster probably before he reached 18. So
Wow.
that does happen as well. I mean, again, right, if you think about the future of work, we should be hiring these kinds of candidates as well, right? It shouldn't just be people from Silicon Valley. Oh, and by the way, like the people who are Kaggle grandmasters, most of them are not based in the US. Many of them are based in Europe, based in India, based in Asia, all around the world, right? So that really suggests that there's great talent all around the world, not just based in the US, and we shouldn't be constrained to this one location.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, if you knew about the distribution. So thanks for touching on that. I wonder if Turing will ever do, any of these types of competitions. I could see just because we have so much talent from all over the world. I could see the potential for that. Do you, have any ideas about that or could see that happening in the future?
I can definitely see it happening in the future. I mean, of course, I don't actually know if it will. But what's interesting is there have been, like, take Kaggle platform, for example, right? There has been past grandmasters who, I mean, because they all work for some company, right? Who have actually hosted competitions in the future. It could be a research type of project. It could be more a commercial type of project, but there's been multiple cases. Like the guy that I mentioned who was a high schooler, I think maybe 1 or 2 years ago, he actually hosted a specific competition on Kaggle as well. So this does happen quite often. I wouldn't be surprised if Turing wants to get involved as well.
Cool. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. I don't know if there are any plans to do so, but seems like it would be definitely a fun event for our engineers. So we'll have to put that in some people's ears. But anyway, QC, it was really, really great chatting with you today. Love learning a bit more about your story and your experience, before Turing and right now at Turing. So thank you so much for joining us and hope to chat with you really soon.